For 7 years, I poured my heart and soul into Horizon Technologies. Every groundbreaking idea, every innovation that put us on the map, they were mine. But in the boardroom, it was always Vanessa Keller's voice announcing my ideas, Vanessa's name in the press releases, Vanessa's face accepting the awards. My brilliant protégé, she called me in private, while building her empire on my creativity. I was naive enough to believe that loyalty would eventually be rewarded. Until that night, I overheard her on the phone. Maya? She's just the workhorse. She'll never know the difference. The next morning, I died. Not literally, but the trusting, eager to please woman I had been ceased to exist. In my rebirth, I became someone else entirely. Eliza Chen, the quiet new hire at Vanessa's biggest competitor. I watched Vanessa from afar as she scrambled to recreate the magic that had once flowed through me. I knew every flaw in her operations, every weakness in her strategies. I didn't need grand gestures of revenge. I simply stopped fixing problems before they happened. You seem familiar, Vanessa said when we met at an industry gala. I smiled. I'm nobody important. But as quarters passed and Horizon stock began to tumble, I became David Mitchell's most valued advisor. Quiet, methodical, patient. I was everything Vanessa wasn't. When the opportunity came to acquire Horizon, I merely suggested the right price. When Vanessa called David begging for a meeting, I volunteered to attend. You don't understand what's happening to my company, she said desperately across the conference table. Actually, I understand perfectly, I replied, finally letting my mask slip. I designed it this way, Vanessa, just like I designed everything else you took credit for. The look of recognition in her eyes was worth every second of the long game I'd played. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about watching them destroy themselves when you finally stop holding them up. My name is Maya Reynolds, and this is how I reclaimed my legacy while Vanessa Keller's stolen empire crumbled to dust before her eyes. The day my so-called career suicide materialized in the office was supposedly a celebration for another one of Horizon's successful product launches. Yet, amidst the champagne and forced cheer, Laura, my one true ally in the company who had started her journey alongside me 7 years ago, wore an expression of stark disbelief. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of confusion and something akin to accusation, fixed on me. Why are you suddenly quitting? She asked, her voice barely a whisper above the murmur of polite conversation. Vanessa took credit for your work again, but this time you're not letting it slide. Her words, laced with a false sense of camaraderie, grated against my nerves. Without a word, I brushed past her, a dismissive gesture that sent a ripple of surprise through the small crowd. I snatched my resignation letter from my bag and placed it on Vanessa's desk, the weight of past injustices a heavy cloak around me. In what felt like a lifetime ago, Vanessa and I had indeed begun our journey at this very company. 2 hopeful aspirants vying for recognition in the cutthroat tech industry. Driven by an almost desperate ambition, I had poured countless nights into crafting what I believed to be revolutionary ideas, meticulously researched and innovative plans designed to transform Horizon Technologies from a modest startup to an industry leader. But then, with a sickening twist of fate, Vanessa had submitted my ideas as her own, time and time again. The first time it happened, I confronted her privately. She smiled that perfect smile of hers and said, Maya, don't you understand? Ideas need charisma behind them to succeed. I'm just the face. You're the brains. We're a team. And like a fool, I believed her. The pattern established itself with brutal efficiency. I would create, she would present. I would innovate, she would accept the accolades. My isolation became my constant companion, punctuated by the venomous whispers and pitying gazes of my colleagues, who saw me as nothing more than Vanessa's shadow. The situation had escalated to a terrifying climax, when I overheard Vanessa speaking to our CEO. "Maya, she's just the workhorse. She'll never know the difference. Besides, who would believe her over me?" The words had sliced through me like a physical blow, confirming every suspicion I'd tried to deny for years. That night, I drove home in a daze, tears blurring my vision. A truck ran a red light, and for a split second, I saw the headlights coming straight at me. The impact never came. I swerved at the last moment. But something inside me died that night nonetheless. The next day, I found myself inexplicably back at my desk, staring at the calendar on my computer screen. 7 years of loyalty, 7 years of being Vanessa's intellectual cash cow, 7 years I would never get back. A cold dread washed over me as I watched Vanessa strut into the conference room, preparing to present my latest innovation to the board. "Maya," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of expectation as she passed my desk. "I need the final touches on the presentation by noon, and don't forget to add those market projections we discussed." The "we" in her statement made me want to scream. There was never a "we." It was always me working, her taking credit. My fingers tightened around my coffee mug, a knot of determination twisting in my stomach. How could I continue to let this happen? How could I articulate the sinking feeling that my life was slipping away, one stolen idea at a time? A wave of grim determination washed over me. I would not allow the past to dictate my future. I made my decision then and there. No dramatic confrontation, no scene in front of the board. I would simply walk away and watch what happened when Vanessa no longer had my brain to rely on. I drafted my resignation letter during lunch and placed it on Vanessa's desk that afternoon. When she finally read it, her reaction was exactly what I expected. First confusion, then panic, then a calculated attempt to manipulate me into staying. "Maya, you can't be serious," she said, her voice soft and persuasive as she closed the door to her office behind us. "We've built something amazing here together. You're integral to our success. What can I do to make you stay? A raise? More public recognition?" I remained silent, my gaze fixed on a point just past her shoulder, absorbing her desperate pleas without emotion. The irony wasn't lost on me now that I was leaving. She was finally willing to acknowledge my contribution. "I've made my decision," I replied, my voice steady. "My 2 weeks' notice starts today." The news of my resignation spread through the office like wildfire. Colleagues who had never given me a second glance suddenly wanted to know why I was leaving, where I was going. Laura approached me as I was packing my desk. "You're really doing this," she said, and not a question, but a statement of disbelief. "After everything you've built here." I looked up at her, a bitter laugh echoing in the confines of my mind. "Everything I've built? You mean everything Vanessa has taken credit for?" Laura had the decency to look ashamed. She had known, of course. Everyone had known. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Reinvent myself," I replied simply. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of exit interviews and knowledge transfer sessions. I documented everything meticulously, but I knew that documentation could never replace the intuition and creativity I brought to the table. Vanessa hovered around me constantly, her anxiety palpable as she tried to extract every last drop of insight before I left. On my final day, there was a small gathering, supposedly a farewell celebration, but it felt more like a funeral for Vanessa's peace of mind. She made a speech about my contributions and how I would be missed. The hypocrisy of it all was almost too much to bear. As I walked out of Horizon Technologies for the last time, I felt a strange lightness. The burden of being someone else's stepping stone had been lifted. But my journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. For 3 months, I disappeared completely. I travelled, I reflected, I planned, I let my hair grow out from its professional bob and dyed it a rich auburn. I traded my conservative wardrobe for something with more edge. I even practiced speaking in a slightly lower register. When I emerged from my chrysalis, Maya Reynolds was gone. In her place stood Eliza Chen, a quiet but confident tech specialist ready to make her mark. I applied to Pinnacle Innovations, Horizon's biggest competitor under my new identity. My resume was carefully crafted, enough experience to be valuable, but not so much that it would raise eyebrows. I deliberately downplayed my capabilities during the interview, presenting myself as competent but not exceptional. I didn't want anyone watching me too closely. David Mitchell, the CEO of Pinnacle, was everything Vanessa wasn't: thoughtful, hands-on, and genuinely interested in fostering talent. When he hired me as part of his strategic development team, I made sure to keep a low profile, offering suggestions only when asked, never volunteering to lead projects. I needed time to observe, to understand Pinnacle's dynamics, and to watch Horizon's inevitable decline from a safe distance. Within 6 months of my departure from Horizon, the cracks began to show. Their next product launch was delayed, then delayed again. The market whispered about internal problems, about Vanessa Keller losing her magic touch. I followed the news with quiet satisfaction, knowing exactly what was happening. Without my insights, without my problem-solving abilities, Vanessa was floundering. At Pinnacle, I was gradually building a reputation for solid, dependable work. I made sure never to shine too brightly, never to draw too much attention. But I also made sure that when I did speak, people listened. David started to notice my analytical skills, the way I could identify potential issues before they became problems. "Eliza," he said one day after I had quietly prevented a major software architecture issue, "you have a unique perspective. I'd like you to be more involved in our strategic planning meetings." I accepted with apparent reluctance, playing the part of the modest team player. Inside, I was exultant. This was exactly what I had been waiting for, a position where I could influence Pinnacle's direction while keeping an eye on Horizon's struggles. The industry gala that season was an elaborate affair, a gathering of tech elites to celebrate innovation and forge new connections. Pinnacle and Horizon had adjacent displays, an ironic twist of fate that placed Vanessa and me in close proximity for the first time since my departure. I watched her from across the room, noting the new lines of stress on her face, the slight desperation in her smile as she tried to charm potential investors. Horizon stock had dropped 15% in the last quarter, and rumours of internal turmoil had become impossible to ignore. Inevitably, our paths crossed at the bar. I had prepared for this moment, rehearsed it in my mind countless times. As she reached for her champagne, her eyes met mine. "Have we met before?" she asked, her gaze curious but not yet suspicious. I smiled, the bland, forgettable smile I had perfected. "I don't believe so. I'm Eliza Chen from Pinnacle Innovations." "Vanessa Keller, Horizon Technologies." She extended her hand, which I shook briefly. "You seem familiar somehow." "I have one of those faces," I replied with a small laugh. "I'm nobody important, just part of David Mitchell's team." Her interest immediately waned at my apparent insignificance. "Well, nice to meet you, Eliza." She moved on quickly, seeking more influential contacts. That brief encounter confirmed what I already knew. Vanessa had never truly seen me, even when I had been right in front of her for 7 years. To her, I had been a resource to exploit, not a person to remember. Her dismissal of Eliza Chen was just another manifestation of her fundamental character flaw. As the months passed, I carefully positioned myself as David's trusted advisor, offering insights that helped Pinnacle capitalize on Horizon's weaknesses. Each suggestion was calculated, timed perfectly to exploit the gaps left by my absence at Horizon. I knew their development cycles, their marketing strategies, their internal politics. I knew exactly when and where they would be vulnerable. Horizon's scrambling David remarked during one strategy meeting. Vanessa Keller's losing her grip. Their last 3 product updates have been mediocre at best. Perhaps they lost some key talent, I suggested innocently. David nodded thoughtfully. Their innovation has definitely stalled. They're just iterating now, not creating. I kept my expression neutral, but satisfaction bloomed within me. Vanessa was finally being exposed for what she was, a fraud who had built her reputation on stolen brilliance. A year after my rebirth, Horizon stock had plummeted by 40%. Their product pipeline had dried up, and their market share was eroding rapidly. Meanwhile, Pinnacle was ascending, our strategic moves consistently outmaneuvering Horizon's increasingly desperate attempts to regain momentum. David called me into his office one afternoon, his expression serious but excited. "Eliza, I am considering something bold. I think now might be the time to acquire Horizon." My heart skipped a beat. This was beyond what I had anticipated, not just watching Vanessa fail, but potentially becoming her boss. The delicious irony of it almost made me laugh out loud. "What are your thoughts?" David asked. I composed myself, adopting the thoughtful persona I had cultivated. Their valuation has never been lower. If we're going to make a move, now would be the time. But we should offer just enough to make it painful for them to refuse, not a penny more. David smiled, clearly pleased with my assessment. "That's exactly what I was thinking. I'd like you to lead the analysis team for this potential acquisition. You seem to have an intuitive understanding of Horizon's operations." "I'll do my best," I replied modestly, while inside I was savouring the perfect symmetry of the situation. The acquisition analysis consumed the next few weeks. I worked methodically, ensuring that every recommendation I made was sound and defensible. When we finally settled on an offer price, 40% below Horizon's peak valuation, I knew it would be a bitter pill for Vanessa to swallow. David made the initial approach himself, a courtesy call to Vanessa to discuss potential strategic opportunities. Her response was predictably hostile, but desperation has a way of softening even the hardest resolve. Within days, she was requesting a formal meeting. "I'd like you to attend," David told me. "Your insights have been invaluable throughout this process." The meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday morning at Pinnacle's headquarters. I chose my outfit carefully that day, a sharp, powerful suit in deep blue, nothing like what Maya Reynolds would have worn. I styled my hair differently, applied my makeup with precision. I wanted to look completely unlike the woman Vanessa had exploited, yet I needed her to eventually make the connection when the time was right. When Vanessa entered the conference room, flanked by Horizon's CFO and legal counsel, I could see the toll the past year had taken on her. The confident strut had diminished to a tense walk, the radiant smile replaced by a tight-lipped determination. She barely glanced at me as David made introductions, her focus entirely on salvaging what she could from the impending negotiation. "Let's get right to it," she said, her voice still carrying that authoritative tone I remembered so well. "Your offer is insultingly low. Horizon Technologies has a legacy of innovation that justifies a much higher valuation." David gestured to me. "Eliza has led our analysis team. She can walk you through how we arrived at our valuation." I opened my presentation, methodically dissecting Horizon's declining performance, their technical debt, their dried-up product pipeline. With each slide, Vanessa's face grew paler. "As you can see," I concluded, "the offer reflects the current reality of Horizon's position, not its past glory." "This is absurd," Vanessa snapped, her composure cracking. "You don't understand what's happening to my company. We're in a temporary downturn, a transitional phase. Our core value proposition remains strong." I leaned forward slightly, allowing myself the luxury of direct eye contact for the first time. "Actually, I understand perfectly," I replied, my voice deliberately shifting closer to Maya's natural cadence. I understand that without continuous innovation, without genuine technical insight, Horizon is just a brand name with declining relevance. Something flickered in Vanessa's eyes. Confusion. Then the barest hint of recognition. She stared at me, trying to place the familiar note in my voice, the pattern of my speech. "Who exactly are you?" she asked, her attention now fully on me. The moment I had been waiting for had arrived. I smiled, no longer the bland, forgettable smile of Eliza Chen, but the knowing smile of Maya Reynolds. "I'm the person who designed every innovation that built Horizon's reputation," I said quietly. "I'm the brain behind every breakthrough you took credit for. I'm the reason you succeeded, and I'm the reason you're failing now." The colour drained from Vanessa's face as recognition finally dawned. "Maya?" she whispered, disbelief evident in her voice. "I used to be," I acknowledged. "Now I'm Eliza Chen, and I've designed this situation just as carefully as I designed everything else you claimed as your own." The room fell silent. David and the others looked confused, but I kept my eyes fixed on Vanessa, savouring the moment as 7 years of theft and exploitation culminated in this perfect reckoning. "You did this deliberately," she said, her voice a mixture of anger and dawning horror. "You left knowing what would happen." "I left to see what would happen," I corrected her, "to see if the great Vanessa Keller could innovate without Maya Reynolds doing the work. Now we all know the answer." David cleared his throat, clearly sensing he was missing something significant. "Eliza, is there something I should know?" I turned to him, ready for this moment as well. "David, before I joined Pinnacle, I worked at Horizon under my birth name, Maya Reynolds. I was the lead developer behind every major innovation Horizon produced over the past 7 years, though you wouldn't know it from any public record or press release." Understanding spread across David's face. "That's how you've been able to anticipate their moves so accurately." I nodded. "I know Horizon's strengths and weaknesses because I built most of their systems. When I left, Vanessa lost more than she realised." Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is corporate espionage. You planned this, infiltrated our competitor with the explicit purpose of destroying us." "No," I replied calmly. "I simply stopped solving your problems. I stopped creating for you. I walked away and built a new life, and you revealed your true capabilities in my absence." I gestured to the presentation still displayed on the screen. "These are the facts, Vanessa. Nothing I've presented here is false or exaggerated. Horizon is failing because you were never the innovator you claimed to be." The CFO and legal counsel exchanged glances, clearly reassessing everything they thought they knew about their company's decline. "This meeting is over," Vanessa declared, gathering her papers. "We'll be pursuing legal action for this sabotage." "On what grounds?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I haven't stolen any proprietary information. I haven't violated any non-compete clause. My contract with Horizon never acknowledged my true role anyway. I simply changed my name and found employment with a company that values my contributions." I smiled again. "But by all means, pursue legal action. I am sure the discovery process would be enlightening for everyone involved." Vanessa had no response to that. She knew as well as I did that any legal scrutiny would only reveal how thoroughly she had exploited me, how systematically she had claimed my work as her own. As they prepared to leave, I added one final twist of the knife. "By the way, Vanessa, the offer on the table is good for 72 hours. After that, it decreases by 5% each week. You're cool." The look she gave me was pure venom, but beneath it, I could see the defeat. She knew she had no choice. Horizon was bleeding money, investors were losing confidence, and now her own team was looking at her with new questions in their eyes. After they left, David turned to me, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. That was quite a revelation. Why didn't you tell me about your history with Horizon? Would you have hired me if you knew I was Maya Reynolds, freshly departed from your biggest competitor? I asked. I needed a clean slate, a chance to prove my value on my own terms. David considered this, then nodded slowly. Fair point. But now that I know, I have to ask, was this personal vendetta the only reason you joined Pinnacle? It wasn't a vendetta, I clarified. It was reclamation of my sense of self, of my creative integrity. And no, it wasn't my only motivation. I joined Pinnacle because I saw genuine potential here, a company that could truly innovate if given the right guidance. I met his gaze directly. I've never given you anything less than my best work, David. The fact that it also exposed Vanessa's limitations was a separate benefit. He studied me for a long moment, then laughed softly. Remind me never to cross you, Eliza. Or should I call you Maya now? Eliza's fine, I replied. Maya served her purpose, but she's part of the past. The acquisition of Horizon Technologies was finalised 3 weeks later. Vanessa and most of the senior leadership took their golden parachutes and disappeared into the corporate ether. I was appointed to lead the integration team, merging Horizon's remaining assets and talent into Pinnacle's organisation. It was during this process that I found Laura again, still working in what had been my old department. She recognised me immediately, despite the changed appearance. Maya, she gasped when we were alone. Is it really you? Everyone said you just disappeared. I reinvented myself, I replied simply. Sometimes that's necessary when you've outgrown your old life. And now you're back as what? Our new overlord. There was a hint of bitterness in her voice. I'm back as someone who recognises talent and gives credit where it's due, I told her, something Horizon's leadership never mastered. In the end, I didn't fire Laura or any of the other colleagues who had stood by silently while Vanessa exploited me. Instead, I gave them what I had always wanted, the opportunity to be recognised for their own contributions, to work in an environment where ideas were valued regardless of who presented them. 6 months after the acquisition, David called me into his office. On his desk was a press release announcing Pinnacle's newest innovation, a breakthrough that would define the next generation of our technology. Your name is on this, he said, pushing the document towards me. As the lead architect and primary innovator, is that correct? I glanced at the paper, seeing my name, Eliza Chen, prominently featured. Yes, that's correct. Good, he said with a smile. Because one thing I've learned about you, Eliza, is that you don't need to take credit for other people's work. You generate more than enough brilliance on your own. As I left his office, I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me for years. My revenge hadn't been about destroying Vanessa, it had been about removing myself from a situation that diminished me and allowing natural consequences to unfold. Without my brain to exploit, Vanessa's empire had crumbled. Without her suppression, my potential had flourished. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't about what you do to others. It's about what you stop doing for them. It's about stepping aside and watching them fall when they no longer have you to stand on. I am no longer Maya Reynolds, the shadow behind Vanessa Keller's stolen success. I am Eliza Chen, recognised innovator and architect of my own destiny. And every morning when I see my name on breakthrough patents and press releases, I smile at the perfect symmetry of it all, how Vanessa's empire collapsed not with a dramatic confrontation, but with my quiet departure and patient observation of the inevitable. 7 years she stole from me. In just 1 year of freedom, I reclaimed everything and more. That is the power of recognising your own worth and refusing to let others diminish it. That is the true rebirth, not in becoming someone else, but in finally becoming fully yourself.